Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Project Ruby, and it has been about a week or so now since the last episode, and a lot has been going on with Ruby in the paintwork department, namely the boot and rear wheel arches, which have always been a kind of sign of disappointment of the car, and it really does let the car down a little bit in those areas. Ever since I took delivery of the car, I was made aware by Rob that there was some weird paint going on the boot. He couldn't put his finger on it, but on close inspection, it wasn't very good. It looked like somebody had actually not even used a rattle can. They'd literally like brush painted some sort of off shade of diamond white on the back of the car, but carefully blended it in round the corners of the window. Like I said I was going to do. That plan changed quickly. And as soon as I started wet sanding that area back, it just revealed some minor rust. And I thought, what's going on here? This is really sus. And then obviously, well, as you can see in this picture here, this is the picture that kind of depicts how I actually got the car in the first place. And that was off the recovery truck, and that's how I got the car. And as you can see quite clearly, if you look at the boot, it was a bit white, wasn't it, when I bought it? I knew something was going on, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Obviously the front wing as well, with that little bit of corrosion on the corner, but it had been dealt with and it had gone back to bare metal. And I wet sanded that back as well to reveal a nice wing. But I've got a feeling that might be a tricky repair in the future, that corner. I might have to respray a couple of panels, let's say, to make it look good. But we'll see how we get on with that in the future. But that's a very minor thing, that corner of the windscreen. This was a much bigger area, and it really made the back end of the car look pretty poor. This is the picture that revealed the extent of the problem before I actually delved into it, and this is a picture that was taken by the dealer that bought it off the family that sold it to Kieran originally. It's this. I'll just get it up on my screen. Sorry for the quality of the image, just trying to enlarge it for myself. That is how the car was presented, and yeah, it wasn't in brilliant condition. It looked flat. It looked sorry for itself, but most of its bits were there, and I think that's what, for me, did it. It's interesting that the badge is still intact, the sticker Fiesta 144 gear, Blumenneck, so they ain't quite got to the paintwork side of that yet. But interestingly, I want you to look at that picture very carefully, and I want you to look at the colour of the tailgate compared to the colour of the quarter panel, the C-pillar, right? Would you not say that the boot is a little bit more creamier than the C-pillar? Okay, observe that. Okay. Obviously, your eyes are going to be drawn to the damage area, which was a hole. I've got a feeling this car wasn't garaged. There is now... it's a bit confusing as to how the car was actually found, and we're trying to get some details. But I thought it was garaged. I don't think it was. I believe that it was outside on a driveway, but under a carport, but one that clearly was dripping water onto the boot in that one specific area, and it could have ruined the car. Because the reason why the boot lip at the bottom that I've shown you personally, that had a little bit of a hole in it, a bit that was just corroded, and I've ground it back and I've just done some very neat filling work just to make it smooth again. That is okay, it's holding up okay, but I might have to go and get some metal welded in that in the future. Might be a bit difficult to repair, but it might need that in the future. But that is the reason why water was getting into the tailgate, going through and getting everything a bit wet. I'm surprised that the boot floor is intact. There are no other corrosion issues, and the bottom of the tailgate is in one piece, because remarkably there's very minimum damage to that tailgate. So I'm really relieved to see that when I cleaned it out, which was the first stage of the process, which was stripping everything, the boot lock, wiper, number plate, stripping everything off, taking everything out of the inside of the tailgate so I could get in and clean all of that with thinners, clean all of it. It looks like cavity wax has been put in, and I think that's why it survived really well. Somebody had put cavity wax in, and I'm really pleased, and I'll be doing so at a later date. But anyway, this is the story how we've gone from that to what is on the car now. And I'm going to take you through the process, and I'm going to show you the final result at the end of this video. So bear with. If you want to learn about paintwork and you think that you've got no confidence to do so, well, that was me before this process. And touchwood, I think I've just completed my most successful paint job ever. And I didn't think it would be possible, but it is when you have patience and time and you know when to walk away from a long day's work and come back with reinvigorated enthusiasm. So this is where we start with dealing with that. Now, my first plan was to immediately, like I do with any other damage, is assess what metal have we got, what is under there. So keyed it all back, cleaned it off even more off camera, used a flappy wheel on my grinder, and it revealed this. Okay, so what we have here is obviously the damage area, the what was the original sort of corroded area of the tailgate. I did find quite a few flakes in the bottom of the tailgate, which was annoying. I had to blast it out with my air compressor and get a vacuum, because clearly all the rusty metal they just literally threw at the bottom of the tailgate. It was thrown together quite quickly, which is probably why the repair didn't last as long as it should have. But it lasted 2 years, so it wasn't bad. It wasn't completely sort of scabbing and falling apart. Whatever paint they had applied, the filler that they used, as you can see in the picture, that filler actually, well, I thought it was fiberglass. It's not. That's not fiberglass. That's proper filler, that is. But whatever it is, it's rock hard. It really is good filler, whatever they've used. And the good sign is, if you look around where the filler has been applied, where that big hole is, ideally you want metal put in. Now, the whole idea of me doing what I'm going to say in a second is simply, I can't afford to have any welding done in this car at this moment in time. However, this is just a short-term thing. Let's just see how long the repair lasts, and we'll see how it goes. But ideally, you don't need to take the back screen out and have the metal put in, and then you know what you're working with. The little pinholes, they just need filling up. They're absolutely fine. These little pinholes, there's about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them possibly. Really tiny ones, you can deal with that. But that wasn't on the cars. For a car that is, at this stage, right, this was pre-MOT, right? It hadn't done any miles at all. It done about 10 miles and then failed to get to an MOT test. No. Pre that MOT pass, I'm thinking it's not proportionate for me to be spending loads and loads of money on something that I could possibly repair without putting metal in. And even putting metal into this tailgate would be a bit of a problem, because the metal on the tailgate is the same as a wing. It's very thin, it will distort, and that will need a ton of preparation to make it look good. A ton. So there were several things that I wasn't a bit funny about. But the main thing is, underneath that rubber in the picture, I checked under that rubber and it's absolutely fine. It just needed a little bit of rust killer in a few places where it started to get surface rusty. But I can confirm that underneath that rubber, between the window and the area you can see, it's absolutely solid. Absolutely solid. And that was great, because that meant that the only filling work needed to be done was that area there. So I'm pleased. Whoever did the job probably did a very good job and ground it back to metal and applied the filler to good metal, because otherwise that would have crumbled over 2 years. There'd be nothing left of it. So you can see where I've gone. I've gone back through to the bare metal, through the primer. There's a couple of different types of primer going on there. You've obviously got the top coat, and then you've got the base coat, and then you've got some sort of etch primer underneath, which is the dark grey. So you've got the light grey, which is the primer, sort of white primer. I think so. I think it's white primer, and then the grey is like an etching primer applied from the factory, possibly with anti-corrosives in, and obviously bare metal. These days we use epoxies, zinc primers. There's a lot more available to us, and that's what I'm going to go and explain next. But the back end of the car, worst part of the car, the wiper arm was nice and rusty. The boot lock was all full of paint missing as well. It was just awful. The sticker, then the badge was awful. I mean, look at the picture of this badge. Goodness me, it's just shot. It's going in the bin. I have got a new one here. Thank you, Dave. I have pre-glued this together. Got sticky tape on the back side of it. It is waiting to go on, along with this from DMB Graphics. I've got 2 of these. The reason being I've got 2 of them is because of the reason that I'm going to explain in a second. So very early on, I set about the task of, right, let's see what we've got, let's grind it back, and then we're left with this after a bit of filling work. I was pretty satisfied at this stage that I've gone on the underside of the tailgate as well. Sorry, I haven't got a photo of that, unfortunately. But I've cleaned that up, put a zinc primer on the inside of the tailgate just to make sure that everything was good, and I think it was all good, to be honest. There wasn't any concerns. There was a bit of rust killing that needed to be done, bit of zinc primer. I did some rust killing on this, but to be truthful, the rust killing didn't need to be done on this top side because I'd ground it to metal, and it revealed very nice metal in most places. Now, the difficulty of filling in this area is obviously you're working against that rubber. It's difficult, very difficult, and it took a lot of sanding down and hours of work to make sure that the contour of that swage line going across above the lock and the wiper was not interrupted. You will notice that there has been a slight undulation in that area. It's very hard, very hard. Body work is skilled work, and I've learned quite a few bits myself. In the picture, there is a little bit of the sort of black sort of scabbiness at the top, but that was dealt with a bit later. I wasn't happy with that. And there was a few patches to the left-hand side where I had to go back to bare metal. Obviously, there were several problems with doing what I was doing in this process, and that was, well, it's outside. How do I combat flash rusting? That was a difficult one because actually I had to basically spray it up temporary in zinc primer just to prevent the flash rusting. And this is where working outside, you are fighting against the elements. We have had the wettest winter ever. We've had a damp spring, and this happened pretty much throughout the spring, and we were still getting wet weather, and it was moist, and I was fighting against it. But anyway, after several sanding sessions of this, we got a contour, we got a line. I wanted to cover the bottom half of the boot at this stage because the areas that needed zinc priming and epoxying was that section there. It was that section. So I just masked off the window. The masking took a while. As you can see, I've actually sanded down the filler to just the area that it needed to be. There was a lot of excess filler that I put on, but too much. You don't have to worry about putting too much filler on because it will just come back off. You've got a DA sander, just use that. I've got a DA sander which I use for this job. I've blocked off the holes for the wiper and the boot lock. It took me 5 minutes to get the wiper and the boot lock off. The wiper motor is held on by 3 bolts and a wiring plug and an earth, and the lock you just have to detach on the rod. It's as simple as that. So it was all good, and we started to apply some coats of zinc primer just shortly after this picture. And in this picture, as you can see, I just applied some zinc primer and etch primer. Okay, now you can use the two interchangeably, but the zinc primer is there as an anti-corrosive agent. I would recommend zinc primer over red oxide. I know a lot of people use red oxide because it's cheaper and zinc primer is more expensive. Why do you think it's more expensive? It's better and more effective in these sort of areas. particularly an area that's going to be exposed to a lot of moisture in the future. So yeah, I would recommend that, particularly for this job. It depends on the job in question, but for this area, yes. Now, as you can see in the picture, the swage line is pretty good, isn't it? It's not too bad. Primer can be quite unrevealing. It could look, when you've done a car in primer, it can look pretty good, and then when you get to the top coat and you've sanded it back, it looks rubbish. And I've noticed a few areas that I could have done better on, but they're not too bad at all. But yeah, you need that as well, and we will also need to apply an epoxy, because an epoxy is a barrier against the metal. Primer is porous. Moisture can get through the primer and get at the bare metal, and the bare metal will start flash rusting. So what you'll find is if you just put now zinc primer is down, but zinc primer can only do so much. You've got to have a barrier. Zinc primer is not a barrier. Normal primer is not a barrier. Etch primer is not a barrier, but epoxy is a barrier. It stops the moisture getting to the metal. Okay, so what you'll find is if you put etch primer, bit of zinc primer, and a bit of normal primer, if you left it outside for a few days, which is what we're working with here, a car outside effectively, you'll find that the panels will start. You'll start seeing little rust spots everywhere, little dots everywhere. Why? Because it's porous. That's what you've done. What you'd have to do then is sand it back. You just wet sand it so it's all gone, and you'll need to apply a top coat ASAP, as soon as you can. The problem with this is that I had to make this look decent enough to go to the MOT, so I put all the wipe and stuff back on. And then, obviously, it doesn't matter for the MOT, but I need to put the number plate on the wiper, the boot lock, etc. I needed to put all this stuff back on, get it to a good state, and then strip it off again, and then, obviously, take it out after the MOT to get the paint. You see, the conundrum here is that I needed the paint scanning for a good paint match, and there was no way I could do that without an MOT. So you see the conundrum I was in there a little bit. So I couldn't really go anywhere. I had to just prepare the paint as it was, and just make a best job of it as possible. In this picture, it was a bit later on. In fact, I think about 3 or 4 days later. We'd had some dry days, as you can see from the driveway floor. By the way, guys, if you notice the car ramps in the picture, you will know that this picture would have been taken around the time I did the fuel tank. That's what was going on at the back. So you can start to put a timeline together of when I did things. So while the tank was out, I had it on ramps. The car was a bit higher, so I'm not bending down. It's quite, it's quite a low car to the floor. So I thought, let's just do it now. And I took the wrappings down, covered the bumper. Ideally, I should have just removed the bumper and the lights, but I couldn't be bothered at this stage, and I protected it enough in the wrapping. And it was only a very light coating, very light indeed. The rest of the paint was just keyed and dried. The main thing with paint is that when you're keying it with sandpaper, wet sanding effectively, 1,800 grit is roughly what I do. When you're keying it, you must dry it off, and if it's flat, it's good. If it's still shiny, you need to go over it again. If you put paint on that shiny surface, it will bubble, it will react, it will just go like it does, like it goes like a tree, doesn't it? It just starts spiraling, and it's just like, oh, it's horrible. It's horrible when it goes like that, and it will just react, and it will just fall off. So don't do it. You must make sure that it is thoroughly matte and flat. That's the aim of the game, matte and flat. But as you can see, the yellow stuff in the picture might be filler primer. Yes, filler primer is fantastic. You can sand it down. It's really good. And that was to take out some of the undulations around that area. And it did help. And it has had a massive effect on the final result of this project. So get some filler primer. Get some filler primer. It's good for sanding down. It's really good. Give it a key. At this stage, I was sanding everything down to about Well, I started at about a 400, then I went to a 600. At this stage, we're at a 600 grit, so we've sanded the entire boot down to about a 600. The areas that are good, I sanded it down to about 800. Obviously, removing the sticker was an absolute pain in the ass. This sticker was absolutely welded to the car, and the badge was easy. Just get a fishing line and take it out. But about 800 grit was good for that top surface, I found, and we got a good matte finish there, and that was a great thing. And we just continued making it as smooth as possible and retaining that swage line. If you notice in the picture, it has gone slightly thicker on the swage line than it should be. That is the final finish. It has gone a little bit thicker, but not so noticeable. Believe you me, the whole purpose of doing this was to make the car look better than it looked before, and secondly, to make things less noticeable, i.e. the colour match and the finish and anything to do with the repair area. Of course, everyone's going to look at Ruby and go, oh yeah, I know what he's done there, because everybody knows where to look now on my car. But if I didn't point all this out to you, you wouldn't notice, put it that way. Now, as well as doing the boot, while that was kind of slowing down and I was getting to a good level before applying some white primer. In this case, you apply white primer for lighter colours, grey primer for dark colours, so the two-tone would have to be grey primer. We looked at the wheel arches. Now, the driver's side wheel arch, I'd already sanded down ages ago. You've been seeing that on the camera for ages. But the passenger side, that was starting to bubble out a little bit and looking a bit, I don't know what this is. Well, I had to get the flappy disc out, and this was what was there. Yeah, absolutely minimal. So the area that was showing visible is the furthest patch on the left-hand side, and it was just where the two metals had started to separate. A bit of moisture had got in, and it just gone boom. Maybe a weakness in the factory, possibly. But this side is a lot better than the driver's side. There was literally a minimal. The driver's side has got some filler in it that someone had done before, but very well, and the rust hasn't come back, so touch wood on that one. If not, I'll just have to have the metal cut out on that side and just have it done. It'd be expensive, but it'd have to be done. Yeah, just a skimmer filler. Yeah, nothing too much. My intention was to paint that section of the arch in, obviously, a custom-made grey to the original paint, using a paint scanner. Another reason why I needed an accurate paint finish, not just for the white but for the grey. And that took a lot of sanding down. There was like 400 grit, 600 grit. Then I went up to 800, then 1,000. And then I got to the stage where it was so super smooth, it was ready to accept the paint. You must make the surface as smooth as possible. Now, a lot of people would say that 1,500 grit in this scenario is too smooth. You don't need to go to 1,500 grit before you put the top coat on or the primers on. I say the smoother the surface, it cannot harm. The smoother your paint is, the more time you put into making the paint smoother, the better the overall finish at the end of the day. Believe you me. So, you know, if anybody says, oh, you don't need to do 2,000 grit, you're wasting your time. Absolutely not. You'll see the difference. Don't let anybody tell you that. And we've just got some other pictures here. And obviously I had to mask around the arch as well. And I just started putting... what I eventually did, because I had to split, obviously you've got the two-tone effect going on with the arch. The driver's side arch was mostly prepared. It was just the lip on the outside that was just starting to bubble in a few places, as you might have seen. I just ground that back and decided to use that slight swage line over the arch, that little lip, as that's the paint line. That's where I'm going to paint up to and then smooth it out around the edges. A body shop would probably blend it in a bit more to the panel, but I didn't want to go too far out. So as you can see where my paint line is, I wanted to do some grey primer. Okay, now I did grey primer all over the place. Now, what I ended up doing later on, I think I might have a picture of this. No, I don't actually. Is I started putting some white primer on the top bit, not the bottom. The bottom bit has to be grey for the grey part, and the white primer for the diamond white that will go on the top side of it. So it was a tricky job, that, having to separate the two colours to get the two-tone effect really nice. But just show you some more pictures of that. Yeah, a couple of coats of that. Again, finally sanded to about 1500 grit, and I just went round the corner and gaffer taped everywhere. I didn't mind getting over spraying the arch because it's just great. It's just great primer. It's fine. It will just come off. And then we were kind of ready for primer. And then obviously, as I was doing the arches in exactly the same manner, preparing the boot as well. I was fighting the weather a lot at this stage, and we'd had some damp weather, and I wanted to, and that's why obviously it's important to put the epoxy on. And this was the result. Now, some of you will say, why are you doing a hard line around the edges? Now, my plan was always to stop around the corners and then feather it in round the corner, so it's a seamless blend. And that was always my intention. And those hard lines, they do say in paintwork not to have hard lines because you'll find it difficult to blend them in. I understand that, but we're only at the priming stage. My idea was that blue tape that you see in the picture, that hard line, would be moved back a bit. And what you do, you don't stick it against the bodywork. You have like a cave where you actually get the wrapper and then mask a cave so that the paint will go in, but it won't travel very far, but you've got no hard line. It's a very nice painting trick for blending in paint, believe you me. There's a lot of tricks that I've learned in this little exercise, and this is probably the number one reason why I wanted to do this at home and not pay a professional. These things are said to try us, and I've definitely gained some learning experience from this. But you can see after several coats of primer, mainly concentrated on the top part, because this is where we need the primer. We don't need to focus. The lower part of the boot didn't need primer at all because it's just been keyed. It's good primer. It's just had the top surface of the top coat wiped off, flatted down. It's just the top bit that needs the primer, okay? And that would be sanded down to around 1500 grit again. And that was pretty smooth, and that would be ready to receive more paint. If I just switch to another angle here. This is a picture when I started wet sanding, and this is when it got messy. Wet sanding goes literally everywhere. It was a messy exercise, yeah, it wasn't nice, I have to say. It was cold as well. I suggest with wet sanding using warm water, because your fingers start to feel as if they're coming off, especially in the cold weather that we had around the springtime. So well worth it. But look, you can see it already. Now, there's two things that you can learn from this picture. Can you see the areas where I've gone a bit too much? Yeah, that swage line. Look at the swage line. I've gone a little bit too much, and I needed to go back and do a little bit of priming over those areas. Doing the swage line is difficult. Doing corners is very hard because you tend to go a bit harder with the sandpaper, and you can very easily go through the paint, and you'd have to do it again. So I had to spray it up again in that area. But no worries, you just use light pressure, very light pressure around those corners. That swage line going all the way around the boot, my God, that was a pain. It took me hours to get that smooth without damaging the paint later on. But you can see in the picture that it's got a gloss to it. It's got a reflection because it's smoother. When you apply primer, it's all bumbly and it's horrible, isn't it? It just looks just horrible. But you can make primer look pretty good. And that is where we got to the last episode. So the last update I did on Ruby not so long ago, where I got the car off the road and drove it down to my garage and just did a little update on the distributor and everything. And from the end of that video, I went straight to the paint shop. That was the stage we were at. So I cleaned it all off, took all the paper off, both arches had been done, everything was in primer, everything was smoothed out. I had to put, obviously, number plate, wiper, boot lock back on to get it through the MOT, and it was in the condition you saw in that video. Nice and flat, quite shiny though. For primer, very shiny. And then we got the MOT, thank God. Then we went to the paint shop and we had a couple of cans made up. And I'll just show you a couple of pictures. This is the paint. Joel's Paints is based in the West Midlands. I would recommend them to anybody who lives in the West Midlands. They've got several shops. There's several other places around the UK who will literally make a can up for you. These were custom-made cans. They took a scan. Fantastic. The only problem I found is that they didn't... Well, the scanner didn't like the white. So I asked him to scan the C-pillar quarter panel. And he had to take a few scans, and it was a custom-made job, so you pay it's usually about 15 quid a can in that place, because they make it fresh. It's all fresh. It's made to an ingredient. They've got a massive database, but I wanted a custom colour, so that would usually cost about 17, 18 quid a can with the VAT. So quite expensive, but I want to know that the paint I'm applying is good and I'm not wasting my time. You know, there's nothing worse than doing a paint job and knowing that the paint isn't really going to be a very good match. Why is that motivating? Stop buying stupid paints, some Halfords that don't match. Go and get some scans, pay a few quid more. It's peace of mind and you know you're not wasting your time. And believe you me, it's paid dividends with this job. But the scanner didn't like the paint. And it just said, no, won't tolerate it. It's a very difficult white. White is a very difficult one. The grey, yeah, he made a can up. I'll just show you a picture of the grey. And this was the ingredients. I'm sorry, I've just twisted the picture around. But that was the grey. It was a satin grey, as the original was. 2K satin, acrylic. It couldn't be polyester. It has to be acrylic. Polyester requires a lacquer. This doesn't need a lacquer. It's a solid colour. It had to be 2K acrylic. So it doesn't need its own lacquer. And this was the ingredients. I don't know what these numbers mean, but I've taken a picture of this and it's going in my my folder with all of Ruby's pictures, because I actually lost those numbers when I actually put it in a can of hot water. This is what I'm going to come to next. So at least I can go to them with that picture and say, that's what the grey was. It was pretty slap bang on. It was a little bit more blue, this grey. I will say this grey was a tiny bit more bluey tinted than the original, but it's so close, you'd only notice if it was in direct sunlight or you're standing literally like that far away. If you're standing a couple of metres away, like you'd see at a car show, you wouldn't think anything of it. That's the point. I will tell you why that paint is in that jug. Hot water. This job is, I will put it this way, this job, no guns. I have an air compressor but don't have guns. I wasn't using guns, etc. I wasn't doing anything like that. It was a purely 100% rattle can job, this. And I wanted to prove that a rattle can job doesn't have to look rubbish. And I think you'll agree with me when you see the final results. The best way of getting the best finish from an aerosol can, follow the instructions. You must shake these cans for 2 minutes after the ball has shaken. Most people think when the ball shakes, that's it, it's done. No, it hasn't mixed properly. You must shake it because the contents separate. Shake it for 2 minutes. Immerse it in hot water in a jug. And you'll put it in the water and you'll hear it fizzing. That's the reaction you're going to get from the can. Aerosol cans will get cold when you use them. And that means that the paint isn't coming out as well. Remember, when you finish spraying a coat, turn it upside down, empty it. Make sure that nothing comes out. Otherwise, you're going to have problems, real problems. And by doing all this, the paint laid on nicer and thinner. It meant less wet sanding and a much more coherent finish. When I got the top coat, this is what I was doing. Look how creamy that's starting to look. Now, I know what people are going to say, oh, but you got the hard lines in still. I know. What a fool I was. I thought I could blend it round the corner with a fantastic paint match. Unfortunately, even the paint scan was a little bit different. Now, my mistake was getting him to do a scan of the C-pillar. Because like I said in the first picture, the picture that the dealer took with the rust on the tailgate, I asked you to look at that picture and look at the differences between the two paints. The boot has always been an off shade compared to the C-pillar, typical Ford, or it's oxidised differently over the years. And as a result, the paint didn't quite match. When I took that masking tape up, I was gutted. I thought, I am never going to feather this in round the corners. So what started as me just doing this, you can see in this picture I've taken the bumper off because I wanted to wet sand behind the bumper and just make sure that was all nice and to the whole back end of the car, just to be thorough. So I took everything off again, took the back bumper off, took me 2 seconds. It's a couple of bolts and a couple of screws. 2 bolts, 2 screws, simple as that. And then obviously at this stage, it's gone on quite thick. It looks like someone's used an emulsion paint because it's quite bumpy. Even with a smooth surface, the paint and using hot water, it will look bumpy. It will look very bumpy and it will look quite matte as it is. That's quite normal. What I decided very quickly was that I had to do the whole boot. And the thing is, I think I was a bit naive in saying I could feather it around the edges. I'm sure I could. Somebody could. But let's just do the whole boot. Look, I've had this paint matched. This paint, I think, is a very good match to the C-pillar. So why stop here? So I took all of this off that you see in the picture. I sanded it all down again. Yep, so I had to mask it up a little bit differently. I used the car cover to just hold down the plastic sheeting, but yeah, that took a lot of time. Wet sanding again, back to about 1,000, just to key the paint. There's no rust, there's no damage. It was quicker because it was just keying it, and I keyed it all the way around. I couldn't take the washer and nozzle out. I just left that in place and just masked really carefully around that area. And masked around the rubber quite carefully as well. And it's all been nicely keyed in that picture. I just literally sprayed up my first coat of paint everywhere. So everywhere receives paint on the top, on the sides. So it's all had a couple of coats. I did order a few cans of this diamond white, and of 3 cans, I've used almost 3. I've got some spare, which was nice. And I used a bit of the grey from 1 can. But, yep, it's looking rather nice there. And just show you another top picture there. There we go. Looks a bit matte and bumpy, doesn't it? It looks like someone's just brush painted it. And that's what is completely normal when you've put a few coats on. And as long as it covers, it looks much better now. It looks quite creamy, actually. I was a bit concerned about the creaminess. But we'll just skip to another couple of areas. So if we look at the arches, yep. So this is the passenger arch. You can see what I mean by the slight bluey tint of the grey that was made up. It's slightly more bluey than the original, but you won't notice. And on this side, I was only doing the 2-tone grey. I wasn't having to go and do the white at the top because that wasn't where any of the corrosion was. But that was looking really, really nice on that side. So having everything covered up. And on the passenger side, wow. Yeah, this was the tricky bit because this side I had to separate the diamond white from the grey, and it was a difficult one. And it was a bit of a compromise, and I had to go further out on this side because obviously I was using that lip as the cut-off, and I was going to smooth that in using some fine 2000, 2500 and 3000 grit just to make sure that it's feathered in against the old paint. And believe you me, you wouldn't notice that there was any paint there after the job. That took some time as well, so I was kind of switching between all 3 areas, so I was always on my feet, put it that way. And just show you another picture of the driver's side. It's just starting to build up the coats. It's looking really, really good there, and that's the only area that I was doing on the driver's side. So I wasn't doing the whole bit that was showing around the outside, just doing the inside lip. That just had a little bit of filler work over the years, and I've just tidied it up, smoothed it out, and it looks pretty neat, and it was pretty smooth, and the paint adhered with no reactions. In fact, I would say over the whole job, I had no paintwork reactions, nothing, because I took my time, I made sure everything was flat, and I cleaned everything, and I used this lovely tool which has been sat on my desk this whole episode. This is such a good tool, and it's cordless as well. Cordless, battery operated. Yeah, I was going through the batteries quite a long time, but you do need one of these. It makes sure that the paint, as soon as I did a coat of paint, bam, straight on, heat straight away, as soon as the paint goes on. So you've given it the best chance of adhering. And then obviously after several coats were applied, then it's time to let the paint breathe for 24 hours. It's important, by the way, guys, when you apply paint, you cannot wet sand it or polish it or do anything with that paint for 24 hours. You need the paint to settle, to breathe, to harden. It needs time, okay? You just don't wet sand it that quickly, okay? And we started just wet sanding a few of the areas. It's starting to look a little bit smoother. That was about, I think that was 1500 grit. The swage line was again very difficult to sand down because you didn't want to go through the paint again and show primer through. Wet sanding the bottom of it. You know, there was a lot of areas I was doing. And then I did have to go over one area. I had to go over an area again where I'd gone a bit too much and the primer was showing through. So I had to spray up a very small area there again. And then we've got this one. After several attempts, we did 1,000 grit, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 and 3,000. 3,000 is the ultimate wet and dry. I think 3,000 is a must. You must go through the stages. It's as simple as that. And it took me, I think, 6 hours of doing 5 stages of wet sanding. Imagine doing wet sanding on all the areas, the arches and the entire tailgate on one piece of sandpaper. And then when you're done, you move on to the next one, then the next one. This is where people just get bored and say, do you know what, let's skip a few stages, it's fine as it is. And it doesn't look as good. But look at this. Pretty impressive, isn't it? I did have to wet sand the C panel and the roof just to make sure that the paint was well polished up, so we'll see what the match is like. You can see in the picture that the paint is very close, which is why you can see why I decided to do the whole tailgate. Why not? And there was absolutely no point in not doing so. At the moment, it hadn't been polished, it had just been wet sanded and dried off. So it was a bit matte compared to the C panel, but you can tell that the differences in colour are very much similar to the way the tailgate looked in the first picture that the dealer took at the start of this episode. So I'm pretty pleased. After a bit of drying, yeah, I had to get the umbrella out because it was a bit wet the other day. Fantastically clean. I cleaned a lot of areas. Look at that. You wouldn't even notice I'd painted it. You can tell that there's been some filling work because the undulations in the arch, particularly in the white area, was a bit profound, but I tried to smooth it over and it looks $1 million compared to what it did before. That was when it wasn't polished. And obviously I had to clean up the inside of the boot as well, just polish that up, and that looks $1 million. That didn't look great before, and now it does. It looks fantastic. That's me wet sanding the old paint to try and see if it will blend with the new a little bit more. And it turns out that I couldn't really get it closer than that, but you can see that there is a little bit more creaminess to the new paint, but in terms of the shine, it doesn't look any shinier. It doesn't look obviously new, and that was the point. These pictures show it looks creamier than what it does in the flesh. It looks pretty bad actually in this picture. It looks really poor, but it isn't that bad at all. And look how shiny everything is now. I've whipped everything off, sanded it back. It took hours. Look how shiny the boot is. That's what you get for 3,000 grit sanding. And obviously I had to start putting everything back on. And look how shiny that is. Now you can see, so if you look north of where the lock goes, if you go to about 10, 11 o'clock, you can see where the area where the original filler was, okay? It is a bit more lumpy. There's nothing I could do about that. I tried several ways of evening it out and it looks better than it did before, but you can see an obvious area where there's some ripples, smooth and shiny ripples. That's absolutely fine. That's all you want. And then obviously we've got the wiper motor back in place. It's literally 3 bolts and an earth, as you can see, a couple of connectors. Obviously I've got the remote locking motor, which is on the left hand side, so there's a couple of wires for that, but it's really nothing much at all. And that is really where we are. And all I can do is take my camera outside and show you the final results a bit later. I've got to wait because it's raining. I tell you what, I'm so sick of this weather. We've had the wettest winter ever, and I think the spring is it's been even worse. It's now raining again. I've just had to whip it off. Well, I'm gonna have to clean this before I put the cover back on. The cover's disgusting. I'm gonna have to put this in the washing machine or something, because I've just noticed a few stone chips at the front, which I'm really annoyed about. That was caused by the car cover. Probably me flapping it around, but I'm having to get it off so many times because, well, quite frankly, look at the weather. It's just awful. I'm so cross. Anyway, I won't get into that, weather and all that. Anyway, you can see this is where I stopped. Okay, and I've smoothed it around the swage line there. I thought that would be an appropriate area, and you can't tell. Just show you in here, nice and smooth. As I say, this is the original paint, this is the painted, so I stopped on the edge here, and I had a bit of a problem merging the two there, but it went down good, and it's really nice. And obviously, as you can see, the boot. Now on the camera it shows a bit more creamier, but in person, believe you me, when you see this car in person, you wouldn't bat an eyelid against it, because I'm going to actually stand back now. Yeah, it looks a bit more obvious on camera, but in person I can assure you, standing from this distance, I wouldn't bat an eyelid. And I've got a feeling that was exactly the colour that the original tailgate was, because I didn't really see much of a difference. There was a difference where I had the new paint and the old paint there, but up here it wasn't so much. But honestly, it's such a minor difference, it's untrue. And now everything's back in. What I have done is I've cleaned under this rubber. I've gone on the inside this way and I've cleaned all this. So I've cleaned it all out. Massive clearing up operation. I'm still getting flecks of blimmin' paint everywhere, going all over the place, but we'll get the rest of it out. But it looks superb, doesn't it? I'll just come to this wheel arch on this side, and you can see what I mean. It's a bit more bluey. It wasn't the best match, but I think it's okay. And in the future, this will be the colour that this will get sprayed in if this is accident damaged, etc. So I've got the code for this now, and it will look more like this and this in the future. But I literally masked up to there, so it's only this section and then coming round here. There's a little undulation here, but I didn't spray this up because I didn't need to. I just went to there, so it looks 10 times better than what it did before, and this is just so smooth. Now, I don't know whether the camera will pick this up. There is an undulation here. Getting this smooth was really hard, but it's only minor. You wouldn't really notice. There's a little undulation here and a little one here. I don't know why I didn't take that out fully, but it's so smooth. I've got to wax this at some point. I've polished it, so it's got a little protective coating, but as you can see, it's beading water quite nicely already. Bumper's been, I've put some baby oil on the bumper. It's looking fantastic. The valance is lovely, absolutely gorgeous. It's superb, and it's all been cleaned around there. Really nice. Honestly, everything lines up nicely. Rob's dad gave me some spare lights. So Rob's dad, who owns the Peugeot 205 diesel that I showed you in one of his collection videos, he's given me very kindly some spare rear lights, because the originals that did have the etching that all these windows have. I'm trying to find the etching on this back window now. I can't remember where it was. Down here. Okay, the etching is there. They were on the back windows, the back lights, sorry. The front lights have got them and the back lights had them, but the back lights were quite scratched up when polishing them up. Did a bit of a wet sand and I wasn't happy with them, so I've put these on and they've polished up to an absolute T. I've got the original ones in the spares, they're not going anywhere. And I'm going to get some new number plates, screws and caps for this, because this looks a bit unsightly compared to everything else. This has been sprayed up as well. This has been sprayed up. Oh, it's just superb. Everything's gone well. Dealer sticker there, brilliant. All I need is a usually fixing and tinkering sticker and we're done. Obviously I'll put the normal sticker and badge on in a future episode when it's a much better day, but it looks so complete at the back with its original back box there. I'm really pleased, and it's all gone down so well, and the finish is just exemplary. And this is what you get, guys, by just taking your time, doing it yourself, wet sanding, wet sanding, wet sanding. It really does help. Can you see that ripple down there? I think you can. Just there. Just a little ripple, but it's a very smooth ripple, and that's the point. Anyway, those of you who are going to see Project Ruby in very, very soon, because this car is now kind of, I'm happy. Obviously, the corner of the windscreen, that's going to be a difficult one. I'll make my mind up on what I want to do with that. I'll probably spray it up really rubbishly, you know, for now, rather than blobs of paint. And then I'll proceed to sort that out after this show season. You've always got to leave things to the end. But I've got to get some, I've got some spare hubcaps. But anyway, I'm going to put the hubcaps back on because they look really nice, and I've got some spares. It doesn't matter now. I'm really pleased, and it just goes to show what you can do with a bit of time and patience. And I will just leave this here. But anyway, guys, you take care. Thanks for listening to this super long episode. This is how you do painting. You take your time. You don't rush. Plenty of wet sanding, plenty of materials. I've told you what materials. Lots of sandpaper of varying grades. Filler primer, zinc primer, epoxy primer. Okay, you can use etch primer, white primer, grey primer, and whatever you need. You need a whole concoction. Rust killer as well. A flappy wheel for your grinder, a DA sander, a multi-tool with some sanding pads, a sanding block, and some good old-fashioned water, and some hot water as well, and a jug. And that's all you need for these jobs. Take care, guys, and me and Ruby will be seeing you in a future show very soon.